Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into something pretty fundamental. What makes trust tick, why it matters so much,
Yeah.
and, how we actually build it. We're going deep.
Definitely a deep dive.
We're going to explore the real-world effects of trust,
Mm-hmm.
how it plays out globally, and what you, the listener, can actually do to build it in your own life.
It's so interesting, we talk about trust as this kind of abstract thing,
Right.
but really bring it down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
They show how it actually affects us every day.
Yeah.
We're even going to look at some super interesting questions like, what's the cost of not having trust?
Yeah.
And what can we learn from, global trust trends?
This is Unitique, the best fractional HR and talent acquisition service company. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It is important for us together with the YouTube algorithms.
The first source talks about this thing called a trust tax.
Right.
It just makes me think about those companies where, every single decision needs a zillion approvals.
Yeah,
Because nobody trusts anyone to just get things done.
exactly. And the source actually puts a nudge on this,
Oh, wow.
It says that organizations with low trust, they can see a 50% drop in productivity because of this trust tax.
Wow.
That's crazy, right?
50%.
Think about all that wasted time, all that wasted energy, all those resources just going down the drain. It's like slamming on the brakes for everything.
It's a massive number. It really shows how much we're missing out on when we don't have trust.
Totally.
And, on the flip side, the source talks about those high trust situations where things just move so much faster and smoother.
Absolutely.
And it makes sense, right? When you trust your team,
Yeah.
you can actually empower them to make decisions and take ownership.
And the research totally supports this.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Companies with a culture of trust, they tend to do so much better than their competitors
Wow.
in terms of revenue growth, employee retention, even customer satisfaction. It's not just about feeling good. It's about real results.
It really drives home the point that trust isn't just this fluffy feel-good concept.
Yeah.
It's a real asset
It is.
with actual tangible value.
Real world value.
So how do we go from, this idea of a trust tax
Right.
to actually building trust?
Right.
What are the pieces we need?
Well, the sources, they give us these 4 key pillars of trust. Integrity, openness, competence, and accountability.
Okay.
And one of the coolest things I found is that they talk about trust being a skill.
Big skill.
Yeah, like something you can actually learn and develop.
Oh, I love that. It's so empowering.
Right.
Because it means we're not stuck with whatever level of trust we have right now.
Totally.
We can get better at it.
Exactly. It's just like you can improve your communication skills or your leadership skills.
Mm-hmm.
You can get better at building trust too.
Okay. Before we dive into those pillars,
Yeah.
I think we got to address this big elephant in the room. You know that idea that trusting people makes you naive?
Right.
Gullible?
That's such a common concern.
It is.
But these sources, they really challenge that head on.
Mm.
They say that understanding how trust works
Mm-hmm.
actually helps you navigate relationships better.
Okay.
So you can tell who's really trustworthy and who's not.
So it's not about blindly believing everything you hear.
Yeah.
It's about being informed.
Yeah.
It's about knowing what to look for, how to figure out if someone's trustworthy.
Exactly. And get this, they even say that those toxic workplaces, those aren't examples of trust failing, but actually trust being used in a negative way.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not trust itself that's the problem. It's how it's being used.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, trust but verify.
Right.
You can have faith in people, but it's good to be informed and pay attention.
Absolutely.
And that's where understanding those 4 pillars becomes really important. Let's start with integrity. That's the foundation, right?
It is.
Integrity is about your actions matching your values.
Yeah. And it's not always about these big, grand gestures.
Mm-hmm.
It's about those little everyday things, too.
Okay.
Consistently showing up on time, keeping your promises, being honest, even when it's tough.
Right.
These all show integrity and build trust over time.
There's this great story in the source about a project leader
Oh, yeah.
who messed up, made a big mistake, and actually took responsibility for it.
Right.
It must have been tough, but admitting that mistake
Yeah.
actually made his team trust him more because it showed his integrity.
Exactly. It's such a powerful example of actions speaking louder than words.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it so compelling is that we can all relate to it. We've all made mistakes.
Yeah, we're all human.
Exactly. And it's really how we handle those mistakes that shows our character.
definitely. And there's another example here, this time from Anderson's own experience.
Okay.
He talks about a colleague who was always honest,
Yeah.
even when it was uncomfortable. And that built a strong foundation of trust between them.
I love those real-life stories. They really show what integrity means in those everyday situations.
Yeah.
It's not just this abstract idea. It's a lived experience
Right.
that has a real impact on our relationships.
Okay, so we've got integrity as the foundation.
The bedrock.
What about openness?
Openness.
How does that contribute to trust?
Well, openness is described as this willingness to listen, learn, and adapt.
Okay.
It's about being open to new ideas, even if they challenge what you already believe.
Right.
And it's the complete opposite of that closed-off, know-it-all attitude,
Yeah.
which can be so toxic in relationships.
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot lately,
Yeah.
especially with like everything feeling so divided these days. It seems like we've lost that ability to have these like open and honest conversations with people who see things differently.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
And the source really contrasts this openness with all the cynicism and distrust that can creep into our interactions.
Yeah.
It's not about being naive and just believing everything you hear,
Right.
but about being genuinely curious, being willing to see things from different perspectives.
It's about having the humility to admit we don't have all the answers. Yeah.
Who's always hiding behind a wall.
Right.
You know, when I think about the times I felt really connected to someone, it's usually been in those moments where we've both been vulnerable.
Absolutely. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create space for others to do the same.
Yeah.
And that's where real trust starts to grow. It's about recognizing that we're all human. We all have our strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not have it all figured out.
So we've got integrity as the foundation, openness as this like key ingredient for connection
Right.
and understanding.
Yeah.
Now let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
The source talks about this global trust index,
Yes.
which measures trust levels across 26 countries.
Fascinating stuff.
It is.
And the findings are really interesting.
Yeah.
Nonprofits, they're viewed pretty neutrally.
Okay.
But businesses actually have a decent level of trust because their intentions are clear.
Oh, they provide goods and services.
Yeah.
People pay for them.
Right.
It's a straightforward deal.
But what really stood out to me was the low trust in media and government.
Yes, that's a big one.
It's pretty alarming.
It is.
The Global Trust Index shows that only 32% of people trust the media to tell the truth.
Wow.
And government institutions.
Yeah.
Even worse.
Really?
Trust levels have dropped to just 26% in the last year alone.
That's a huge drop.
It is. Why do you think this is happening?
It's complicated, lots of factors at play, but I think a big part of it is that people feel like these institutions aren't really working for them. There's a sense of corruption, bias, lack of accountability.
Yeah.
And that just eats away at trust.
It's interesting because trust in these institutions is so important for a society to function well.
Absolutely.
We need to be able to rely on our leaders, our institutions,
Yeah.
to make decisions that are good for everyone. When that trust is broken, it creates a lot of instability and uncertainty.
It does. And rebuilding that trust is a huge challenge.
It is.
But I think understanding how trust works, like we're doing here,
Yeah.
is a crucial first step.
Okay.
It helps us figure out why there's distrust in the first place,
Right.
and then start figuring out ways to fix it.
So we've gone from those small individual interactions to like the big picture of societal trust.
The macro level.
Now let's bring it back to like our personal and professional lives.
Okay.
The source talks about how important intentions are
Intentions, yeah.
when it comes to building trust.
Think of intentions as the engine driving our actions.
Okay.
Even if someone is super competent, if their intentions aren't clear or they seem kind of shady,
Right.
people are going to pick up on that.
Yeah.
They're going to be hesitant to trust them.
It's like when you meet someone who seems really polished and professional, but something about their vibe just feels off. Like their words say one thing, but their actions hint at something else.
Exactly. And then on the other hand,
Yeah.
someone with great intentions but not a lot of skill,
Right.
they might mean well, but they're not very effective.
Right.
It's like that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
So it's not just about what you do,
No.
but why you do it.
Exactly.
Your intentions shape your actions
Right.
and influence how people see you.
They do.
And this is where authenticity comes in.
Right. Absolutely. You can't fake good intentions forever.
Right.
People will figure out your true motives eventually.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to be transparent about your goals, your motivations, to let people see the real you.
It makes sense. People can usually tell when someone's not being real.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about integrity and openness. What's the next pillar of trust?
So the source goes into competence next.
Okay.
It defines competence as the ability to deliver results. Based on your skills, your knowledge, your experience. It's what people see, the proof that you can actually get things done.
It reminds me of that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. You can talk a big game,
right?
But in the end, it's your competence that really earns people's trust.
Totally. And the source emphasizes that competence isn't just like a fixed thing.
Right.
It's something you always have to be working on.
Right.
They use the example of Tiger Woods.
That's Tiger Woods, yeah.
Even as like a world-famous golfer, he was constantly trying to improve his technique.
Oh, absolutely. He actually overhauled his swing like a bunch of times throughout his career.
Wait, really? What did he change?
Well, one of the biggest things was altering his stance and grip.
Okay.
To get better accuracy and control. And he spent hours and hours practicing, analyzing his swing, even when he was already winning tournaments.
That's wild. I mean, he was already at the top of his game.
I know, right?
It just shows how even the best people recognize that they need to keep improving.
Totally. It's not about like sitting back and saying, I'm good enough. It's about always pushing yourself to get better.
Always striving to learn and grow.
Exactly. And that mindset is so important now more than ever.
Yeah, things change so fast.
Right. Like the skills that were in demand just a few years ago might be completely outdated now.
Totally.
So to stay competent, you got to be a lifelong learner. You got to always be updating your knowledge and skills to stay ahead of the curve.
It's like a degree or a certification might get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
But it's that commitment to learning, to growing, that will actually keep you moving forward.
It's about being adaptable, embracing new challenges.
Totally.
And we're actually seeing companies changing how they hire people.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, companies like Google, they're starting to prioritize skills and experience over formal qualifications.
Interesting.
It's about what you can actually do, not just what's on your resume.
So competence is about having those right skills and always honing them. What about accountability? How does that fit into all of this?
Accountability is like the glue that holds it all together.
Okay.
It's about taking responsibility for your actions and what happens because of them.
Right.
The good and the bad.
It's like anyone can make a promise.
Right.
But it's following through that really matters.
Absolutely. And when things go wrong, which they inevitably do,
of course,
it's about owning up to your mistakes, taking steps to fix them.
You got it. Think about that story we talked about before, the project leader who admitted he messed up.
Yes.
That's accountability in action.
It is. It's not about blaming others, making excuses.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility and doing what needs to be done to make things right.
And that kind of behavior just builds so much trust.
It does.
When you know someone is going to be accountable, you feel more confident relying on them, working with them.
For sure. Accountability strengthens trust in both your personal and professional life.
Makes sense.
It creates this feeling of safety, predictability, knowing that people are responsible for what they do.
Right.
And it builds a culture of ownership.
Okay.
Where everyone feels like they can make a difference.
One thing that really stood out to me from these sources is that they emphasize balancing trust with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Ah, that's so important.
It's not about blindly trusting. It's about being informed and discerning.
Right. Anderson's story about that electric vehicle battery project really illustrates this.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that.
So they trusted this supplier who had a great track record, but they ended up with all these delays and setbacks.
Oh, no.
Because they didn't really dig into the specifics of the supplier's process.
So it's not about checking your brain at the door when you trust someone.
Exactly.
It's about staying engaged, asking questions, understanding the details.
You got it. In Anderson's case, they were initially impressed by the supplier's reputation.
Right, right.
But they didn't scrutinize the actual manufacturing process for this new type of battery. If they had, they might have seen some red flags earlier on.
So it's about trusting but verifying.
Yes.
Being informed enough to ask those good questions and really assess the situation.
And this applies to so many areas of life, right?
It does. It makes me think about that old saying, measure twice, cut once.
Yes.
It's about being thorough, thinking things through, especially when there's a lot at stake.
Absolutely. And this ties back to open communication, doesn't it?
It does.
Anderson talks about how communication breakdowns can lead to mistakes, frustration, especially in those high-pressure situations.
Yay.
He stresses how important it is to create a safe space
Okay.
where people feel comfortable speaking up about challenges, delays, or even just needing help.
It's so easy to get caught up in your own work
It is.
and assume everyone else is on the same page.
Yeah.
But without that open communication, things can go wrong really quickly.
Exactly. Misunderstandings fester, problems escalate.
And that's where leadership is so important.
Absolutely. It's about setting that tone for honest and open communication, actively asking for feedback,
Right.
addressing issues head on.
Anderson specifically warns against micromanaging.
Oh, yeah.
It's not about constantly checking up on people.
No.
It's about creating a culture where open communication is just the norm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about giving people the power to share their thoughts, raise concerns, ask for help without feeling judged or punished.
And that kind of environment doesn't just happen overnight.
It takes work.
It does. It takes conscious effort to build trust and that feeling of psychological safety within a team.
Right. It's about leading by example, being vulnerable yourself,
Yeah.
encouraging others to do the same.
Speaking of psychological safety, the source goes into that a bit.
Yes. It's that belief that you won't be punished or humiliated
Right.
for speaking up, sharing your ideas, or making mistakes.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd get to that.
It's crucial.
It seems so important for building trust,
Isn't it?
especially on teams where people need to feel comfortable taking risks and trying new things.
Absolutely. When people feel psychologically safe, they're more likely to share their ideas, challenge the way things are done, and work together effectively.
It creates a culture of learning and growth.
Exactly. Mistakes are seen as opportunities to learn, not as failures.
And that kind of environment doesn't just benefit the individual,
Right.
it benefits the whole organization.
A whole team, yeah.
When people feel empowered to do their best work, you get better ideas, more innovation, and ultimately better results.
It's about building a culture of respect, empathy, understanding. It's about recognizing that everyone has something valuable to offer
Yeah.
and creating a space where those contributions are welcomed and appreciated.
So we've talked a lot about communication and psychological safety, but what about action?
Action, right.
How do we move from just talking about trust to actually showing it?
Well, the source really emphasizes that trust isn't just about words, it's about actions.
Okay.
It's about being there for people, doing what you say you're going to do,
Right.
supporting them when they need you.
Henderson gives a great example of this.
Oh, yeah?
He talks about leading a really high-pressure project and noticing that some of his colleagues were getting burnt out.
Yeah, it happens.
Instead of just telling them to take a break,
Right.
he actually stepped in and took on some of their work,
Wow.
giving them the space to recharge.
That's a powerful example of how these small acts of support can really build trust.
It is. It's about going beyond just words.
Yeah.
It's about showing your commitment through your actions.
It's like that saying, people might not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
And when you make people feel valued, respected, supported, you earn their trust.
Exactly. And that kind of trust, it creates this ripple effect.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when people feel trusted, they're more likely to trust others.
Right.
And it just keeps going.
It's a beautiful cycle.
It is. It benefits everyone.
So we've got these 4 pillars: integrity, openness, competence, and accountability.
The foundation of trust.
And we've seen how they all work together, how they create that strong base for trust in our relationships, both personal and professional.
Right.
But it's not enough to just understand these ideas, right?
Not at all.
We actually have to put them into practice. We have to cultivate trust.
You're absolutely right. Trust isn't something that just magically appears.
Right.
It's something you have to work on, build over time. It's about consistently demonstrating those 4 pillars in everything you do, how you interact with people.
Yeah.
It's about being authentic, being dependable, doing what you say you're going to do.
And it's about recognizing that trust is a two-way street.
Oh, that's a great point.
It's not just about how much you trust other people. It's also about how trustworthy you are.
We've been talking a lot about how to figure out if someone else is trustworthy. But it's just as important to look at our own behavior. Make sure we're living up to those 4 pillars ourselves.
It's like, if we want to live in a world where trust is the norm, we need to start by being trustworthy people ourselves.
Exactly. We need to be the change we want to see.
Be the example.
Yes.
And remember, building trust takes time.
It does.
It takes effort. And sometimes it takes being vulnerable.
It does. But as we've seen from all these examples and insights, it's so worth it.
It is.
It leads to better relationships, more effective teams, and ultimately a more fulfilling life.
It feels like, we've uncovered this like hidden force that affects everything.
Yeah.
We talked about that trust tax.
Right.
And all the good stuff that comes with high trust situations. But it goes even deeper, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like, if you're always second-guessing people,
right,
or feeling like you can't count on them,
yeah,
that creates so much stress.
Oh, yeah.
So much anxiety.
It's exhausting, like carrying this weight around all the time.
Yeah.
You're always on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right. But when you have trust, you can actually relax.
Yeah.
Focus on what you need to do.
Yeah.
Be more present.
Right.
It frees up so much mental and emotional energy.
It does. It really does. It's like we've been given this amazing toolkit for building trust.
We have.
But like any tool, it's up to us to use it the right way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to those 4 pillars.
Right.
It's not enough to just, understand them in our heads.
Yeah.
We have to live them.
Right. We have to put them into action.
Exactly. We got to make a conscious choice.
Yeah.
To operate from a place of trust.
Okay.
Not just with others, but with ourselves too.
That part about trusting ourselves really hits home for me.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get stuck in self-doubt.
It is.
To second-guess ourselves.
All the time.
Yeah.
But if we don't trust ourselves, how can we expect anyone else to?
That's a great point. It all starts with trusting ourselves.
It does.
It's about believing in what we can do, staying true to our values, and taking responsibility for our actions.
And as we build that trust within ourselves, it starts to spread outward.
Okay.
It affects how we interact with others.
It's like building that strong foundation within.
Yes.
And then using that to build stronger connections with other people.
Exactly. And like we've talked about, building trust takes time, takes effort.
Yeah.
Sometimes it means being vulnerable.
It does.
But the payoff is huge.
It is.
Better relationships, more effective teams, and just a more fulfilling life overall.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the biggest thing that stands out to you? What's one action our listeners can take today to start building more trust in their own lives?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's remembering that trust isn't just something that happens.
Right.
It's a choice. We have to be intentional about it.
Right.
We have to work at it.
Okay.
And it all starts with really understanding and living out those 4 pillars.
Integrity, openness, competence, and accountability.
Those are the keys.
I love that. It's so empowering to know that we actually have control over this.
We do.
It's not something that just happens to us.
Right.
We create it.
Exactly. And as we each build more trust in our own lives, we're actually helping to create a more trustworthy world.
It's that ripple effect again.
It is. It starts with each of us.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of trust.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been an amazing conversation.
It has.
I hope you've all learned something new and helpful.
Me too.
Until next time, keep diving deep.